Carlos didn't have much. A rusty bike, a tiny one-bedroom house with a leaking faucet, and a stack of unpaid bills that kept him up at night. But what he did have was integrity, the kind you can't buy or fake. So when he spotted a black leather wallet lying on the ground outside the gas station, where he worked, thick, expensive, and stuffed with cards and cash, he didn't hesitate. He looked around. No one in sight. Most people wouldn't have thought twice. But Carlos did. He wiped the dust off the wallet, opened it, and froze. Inside, a metal credit card, a corporate ID badge, and a business card with gold lettering that read, Thomas W. Kingsley, CEO, Kingsley International Group. Carlos whistled softly. He'd seen the name before on billboards on the news. Kingsley International built skyscrapers, launched tech companies, funded universities, and here was his wallet, sitting in Carlos's hands, next to a pack of discount peanuts and a half-pumped gas tank. Carlos's coworker peeked out. "You gonna keep it?" Carlos shook his head. "Not mine." That night after his shift, he walked the 3 miles to the return address, listed on the business card. A towering glass office, security at the front desk. "I found this," Carlos said, holding out the wallet. The guard raised an eyebrow, then picked up the phone. Moments later, a sharply dressed man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes appeared. He took one look at the wallet and blinked in disbelief. "Where did you find this?" he asked. Carlos shrugged. "Outside the Valero on Main." "You walked all the way here?" Carlos nodded. Felt like the right thing to do. The CEO stared at him for a moment. No expression, then said, "Thank you." Most people wouldn't. Carlos smiled faintly. "I'm not most people." He turned and walked away. Didn't ask for a reward. Didn't expect a thank you card. Just did the right thing and went home. But what Carlos didn't know was that someone had been watching. And 3 weeks later, that someone would send a limousine to Carlos's front door. 3 weeks passed. Carlos went back to his routine gas station shifts, fixing the leaky faucet with duct tape and stretching spaghetti dinners into 3 nights. He never expected anything from the rich man, whose wallet he returned. Why would he? He figured the guy probably forgot him the moment the elevator doors closed. But one Saturday morning, just as Carlos was heading out to catch the early bus, he heard a deep rumble outside his window. He pulled back the curtain and nearly dropped his coffee. A sleek jet-black limousine sat idling in front of his tiny house. Carlos blinked. No way. A suited driver stepped out, adjusted his cap, and walked straight to the front door. Carlos opened it before he could knock. "Carlos Alvarez." Yeah." The man smiled. "Mr. Kingsley sent me. He would like to see you today." Carlos stared. "Is this a joke?" "No, sir. We'll take care of everything. You're expected." Carlos stood frozen. The entire neighborhood watched from behind cracked blinds and open porches. He could almost hear the whispers. He glanced down at his oil-stained sneakers and worn jeans. "I'm not dressed for whatever this is." The driver chuckled. "There's a suit waiting for you in the car. Your size." Carlos exhaled slowly. "Let me grab my keys." The ride downtown felt surreal. Carlos sat in the back, staring out the tinted windows as the limo cut through traffic like royalty. Every building they passed, every luxury store, every billboard, it all felt like another universe. They pulled up to a private rooftop entrance. Carlos stepped out, in a tailored navy suit and polished shoes, into a quiet lobby where the air smelled like leather and citrus. A young assistant greeted him with a nod. "Right this way, Mr. Alvarez." They led him through glass doors, past sleek desks and wide boardrooms, until finally they arrived at the top floor, where the door was already open. Inside sat Thomas Kingsley, the CEO, behind a massive desk. His suit was immaculate, but his expression was different this time, softer. "Curious, Carlos," he said, rising. "Thank you for coming." Carlos cleared his throat. Wasn't sure if I should. I'm glad you did. Kingsley walked around the desk and held out his hand. Carlos shook it cautiously. I've met thousands of people, the CEO said. Powerful people, wealthy people. But not many honest ones. You didn't just return my wallet. You walked miles to do it. You made a choice that said everything about your character. Carlos shrugged awkward. Didn't think it was a big deal. But it is, Kingsley said. And I want to show you why. He stepped aside, pressed a button on the wall, and a massive curtain drew back to reveal something stunning. A photo of Carlos standing in front of Kingsley Tower, holding out the wallet, captured by a security camera. Framed. Why is that? Because people like you remind me what matters. You didn't ask for a reward. But I have one anyway. Carlos stared. I want to offer you a chance, not a handout. A position. Something that can change everything. Carlos didn't know what to say. He looked from the framed photo back to Mr. Kingsley, unsure if this was some kind of elaborate prank. A position, he asked cautiously. I'm just a gas station clerk. The CEO smiled. That's what your resume says. But that's not who you are. Carlos shifted uncomfortably in his new suit. What kind of position are we talking about? Kingsley motioned toward a nearby screen. It flickered on, showing images of construction sites, community centers, and outreach programs. Every year, our foundation sponsors a handful of community ambassadors, people from underrepresented neighborhoods, people with potential, people who lead by example. Carlos raised an eyebrow. You think I'm one of those people? I know you are, and I want to give you the tools to go further. The proposal was simple, but staggering: a paid mentorship, full training in project coordination, monthly stipends, and eventual promotion to community liaison. It would mean leaving his job at the gas station. It would mean stepping into an office for the first time. And it would mean change, a lot of it. Carlos felt his stomach twist, with both excitement and fear. Why me? Just because I returned your wallet. Kingsley shook his head. Because you returned it when no one was watching. Because you didn't expect anything. And because I want people like you in my company. People who remind us what values look like in real life. Carlos looked down at his hands. They were calloused from years of labor, but they were steady. Okay, he said quietly. I'll try. You won't regret it. Kingsley replied. From that day on, Carlos's life began to shift. His first day at the foundation's offices was overwhelming. There were whiteboards filled with timelines, staff in polished shoes, speaking in buzzwords, and espresso machines that looked more complicated than his entire kitchen. But Carlos paid attention. He asked questions. He took notes. And above all, he showed up, on time, every day, with the same quiet dignity that had once led him to walk 3 miles just to return a stranger's wallet. And people noticed. Not just Kingsley, but others in the building too. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. But his work spoke volumes. And within weeks, he was helping coordinate real projects, fixing broken sidewalks, organizing job fairs, speaking with local leaders about park cleanups. For the first time in his life, Carlos felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was building something, not just for himself, but for his entire neighborhood. Carlos had always known what it meant to work hard, but now he was learning what it meant to work with purpose. Each day brought new challenges, meetings, site visits, budget reports, and community outreach plans. It was a different kind of exhausting, the kind that left his mind racing instead of his body aching. But there was a spark in him now. He began bringing his ideas to the table. Modest at first, like organizing translation services at job fairs so his neighborhood's older residents could attend without fear, or suggesting a scholarship program for local kids who couldn't afford college application fees. What surprised him most wasn't that people listened. It was that they acted on what he said. He wasn't invisible anymore. One afternoon, Carlos sat in a boardroom with Kingsley himself and other foundation leaders. He presented a proposal clean and typed with bullet points and impact forecasts for renovating an abandoned community center near his old neighborhood. He paused mid-sentence, worried the room had gone quiet for the wrong reason. But then Kingsley leaned forward and said, "Let's fund it." Carlos blinked. "You mean now?" Kingsley nodded. "Immediately. You did your homework. You showed us the need. Let's do something about it." Carlos left that meeting in a daze. He walked outside, into the sunshine, loosened his tie, and stared up at the same skyscraper he had once approached as a stranger, with a found wallet in hand. It didn't feel like someone else's world anymore. It felt like part of his. Weeks later, the community center renovation began. Carlos visited every day after work, talking to the contractors, checking on the paint colors, making sure the kids would have enough sports equipment, and reading nooks. One morning, a woman approached him outside the construction fence. She looked nervous. "You're the guy who found that wallet, right?" she asked. Carlos chuckled. "That's me. Word gets around, huh?" She nodded. "My son's been struggling since his dad passed. That center, it's going to mean everything to him." Carlos felt something stir deep in his chest. "Then we'll make sure it's ready for him." And he meant it, not because it was his job, but because now he understood what it meant to make a difference, not with grand gestures, but with consistency, honesty, integrity, the same things that brought him here in the first place. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was set for Saturday morning. By Friday night, the old community center, once crumbling and forgotten, was transformed. The walls gleamed with fresh paint. New lights lit up the hallways. Bookshelves stood stocked. A basketball hoop had been installed out back, along with a tiny garden that Carlos insisted on planting so the kids could learn how to grow something. Carlos barely slept that night. He wasn't nervous about the speech they'd asked him to give. What kept him awake was the thought of the faces who would show up. Faces from his neighborhood. Kids who needed a safe place to go. Parents who needed someone to believe in them. Elders who would walk through the doors and remember what the building used to be. He arrived early that morning in a clean white button-up shirt. No tie, just himself. By 9 a.m., the crowd had gathered. Local press, community members, city officials. And at the last minute, a familiar figure in a dark suit stepped out of a black SUV. "Mr. Kingsley." He walked over, quietly clapped Carlos on the back, and said, "You did this." Carlos smiled. "We did." The event began. A few words from a city council member. A local pastor blessed the center. Then the microphone was handed to Carlos. He stood under the archway with a handmade banner fluttering overhead that read, "Bienvenidos." He cleared his throat. "When I found that wallet," he began, "I had no idea it would lead here. I wasn't looking for a reward. I just wanted to do the right thing." He paused, scanning the crowd. Neighbors, teachers, tired moms, grinning kids. "I grew up in this neighborhood. I walked past this building every day. I remember when it was full of life, and I remember when it went quiet. But now, it's back. Because one decision led to another. And that's the thing about kindness, it echoes." He looked toward Kingsley, then back to the crowd. "Someone once told me that doing what's right, even when no one's watching, is the real mark of character." Turns out, someone was watching after all. Laughter. A few tears. A round of heartfelt applause. The ribbon was cut, and the doors opened. Kids rushed in. Parents followed. The old center breathed again. Later that evening, long after the crowd had left, Carlos stood alone in the quiet main hall, surrounded by warmth and possibility. He thought back to that night outside the gas station. That wallet. That choice. And he smiled. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button. Drop a comment, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story. See you in the next one.